The smell of stale beer and lemon disinfectant had become my signature perfume. At 2:47 a.m., I was on my knees scrubbing the sticky residue from beneath the bar counter, my lower back screaming in protest. The club was finally empty, or so I thought. The bass that had been shaking the walls for the past 6 hours still seemed to reverberate in my bones, a phantom pulse that would follow me home to my cramped studio apartment. I'd been working double shifts at Velvet Noir for 3 months straight, ever since my piece of shit ex, Derek, had cleaned out our joint account and disappeared. Left me with nothing but his debts and the eviction notice that grew more threatening by the day. My hands were raw. My feet ached in ways I didn't know feet could ache, and I was pretty sure I'd forgotten what a full 8 hours of sleep felt like. The mop bucket sloshed as I dragged it across the black marble floor, watching the dirty water swirl with glitter and spilled cocktails. Outside, the city hummed with its late-night rhythm, distant sirens, the occasional shout, the perpetual growl of traffic that never truly stopped. I was invisible here, just another exhausted face in a city full of people trying to survive. I was reaching up to wipe down the top-shelf bottles when I heard it, the soft click of expensive shoes against marble. My heart stuttered. I'd locked the doors myself 20 minutes ago. I'd watched Marcus, our head of security, do his final sweep. Everyone was gone. Everyone should be gone. I turned slowly, the cleaning rag still clutched in my trembling hand. He sat at the corner booth like he owned it, like he owned everything. And maybe he did. The dim emergency lighting cast him in shadows and sharp angles. His suit was black, but not the kind of black you buy off a rack. This was the kind of black that absorbed light, custom-tailored to shoulders that suggested both power and violence held in careful check. His hands rested on the table, and even from across the room, I could see they were scarred, the knuckles slightly misshapen, the hands of someone who'd done his own dirty work before delegating it to others. But it was his face that stopped my breath entirely. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my exhausted appearance, and an expression of perfect calm that was somehow more terrifying than any show of aggression could have been. He couldn't have been more than 35, but he carried himself with the kind of authority that made age irrelevant. Behind him, barely visible in the darker recesses of the club, I caught the silhouette of at least 2 other men. They hadn't sat down. They simply stood, still as statues, watching. "We're closed." My voice came out smaller than I'd intended, barely more than a whisper that couldn't possibly carry across the empty space between us. He heard me anyway. "I can see that." His voice was smoke and expensive whiskey, with an accent I couldn't quite place, something European buried under years of American English. "You work hard, don't you?" It wasn't really a question. He said it like he already knew the answer, like he'd been watching me for longer than just this moment. My survival instincts were screaming at me to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The mop handle became my lifeline, something solid to grip as the room tilted slightly. I need to finish closing. The manager will... Your manager left an hour ago." He shifted slightly, and the movement was liquid grace, as did the owner. As did everyone else, except you and the night cleaning crew, who I've already compensated for the evening and sent home. Ice flooded my veins. He'd paid off the cleaning crew? How long had he been planning this? How long had I been alone with him without realizing it? "What do you want?" The question came out sharper than I'd meant, fear translating into a brittle kind of defiance. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. Or appreciation. "One last drink." He gestured to the empty seat across from him, a king offering a peasant an audience. "Join me." "I don't drink with customers." The words tumbled out automatically, the kind of line I'd used 100 times to deflect unwanted attention. His smile was slight, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face into something even more dangerous. "I'm not a customer." The way he said it made it clear this wasn't his first time at Velvet Noir. This wasn't a casual visit. The owner probably paid him for the privilege of staying in business. Men like this didn't ask permission. They informed you of what was already decided. I really should... I started backing toward the employee door, my brain finally catching up with my body's desire to flee. "Emma." My name on his lips froze me mid-step. I hadn't told him my name. I wasn't wearing a name tag. The realization crashed over me like cold water. He knew who I was. He'd known before he walked in here. How do you— Sit down. It was barely above a whisper, but the command in it was absolute. Not a threat, not yet, but a certainty. The kind of tone that suggested he was used to being obeyed, and that disobedience would be noted. The two shadows behind him shifted almost imperceptibly. My legs moved before my mind could override them, carrying me toward the booth like a puppet on strings. I sank into the leather seat across from him, the cold material seeping through my thin work pants. Up close, I could smell him. Sandalwood and something darker, like gunpowder and expensive cologne trying to mask the scent of violence. His eyes never left my face as he reached into his jacket. My entire body tensed, every muscle coiled to bolt. But what he withdrew wasn't a weapon. It was a silver cigarette case, engraved with initials I couldn't quite make out in the low light. "You don't smoke," he said, not offering one. It wasn't a question. No. Good. He placed the case on the table between us, an odd gesture that felt significant in a way I couldn't understand. Derek Castellano. The name hit me like a physical blow. My ex. The man who'd destroyed my life and vanished 3 months ago. You know Derek? My voice cracked on his name. I know he stole from me. Those dark eyes held mine, and I saw something cold and ancient swimming in their depths. $300,000 to be precise. He was supposed to move a shipment. Instead, he moved the money into an offshore account and ran. The room spun. $300,000. Derek had stolen from the mafia, from this man. And now this man was sitting across from me at 3 a.m. in an empty nightclub, saying my ex-boyfriend's name like a curse. I don't know where he is. The words rushed out, desperate, honest. He left me with nothing, took everything and disappeared. I haven't heard from him since. I know. He leaned back, the leather creaking softly under his weight. I know he left you with his debts. I know you're working 3 jobs trying to keep your head above water. I know you're 2 weeks away from eviction. I know everything about you, Emma. Terror and humiliation warred in my chest. He'd been watching me, investigating me. I was a problem to be solved, a loose end in whatever Derek had done. I didn't know about any of it. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together under the table. I swear, I had no idea what he was involved in. I'm not part of whatever he did. I'm nobody. Nobody. He repeated the word like he was tasting it, finding it lacking. He reached across the table, and I flinched instinctively, but he was only pushing a glass toward me. When had he poured it? I hadn't even seen him move. Amber liquid caught the light. Whiskey. Probably older than I was. Probably worth more than my monthly rent. Drink, he said softly. My hand trembled as I lifted the glass. The whiskey burned going down, but it was smooth, complex. Nothing like the rot gut I'd occasionally splurged on during particularly bad nights. I set the glass down carefully, watching him watch me. Derek had a daughter. His words were casual, conversational, but they detonated in the space between us like a grenade. Did you know that? My blood turned to ice. What? 4 years old. Lives with her mother in Queens. Mother works as a nurse. Struggles to make ends meet. Derek never paid child support, another debt he left behind. He paused, letting that sink in. But you didn't know about her either, did you? The betrayal was a knife between my ribs. A daughter. Derek had a daughter, and he'd never said a word. How many other lies? How many other secrets? No, I whispered. He nodded slowly. I didn't know, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. You're not like him. I knew that the first time I saw you. His gaze traveled over my face, not leering, but assessing, cataloging. You're honest, loyal. You work yourself to exhaustion for debts that aren't yours, in a city that will chew you up and spit you out without a second thought. Why are you telling me this? The question came out broken, barely holding together. If you're going to kill me for what Derek did, just kill you? For the first time, genuine emotion crossed his face. Surprise, then something that might have been offense. Emma, I'm not going to kill you. Relief started to flood through me, premature and foolish. You're going to work for me. The relief died instantly. replaced by fresh terror. What? He stood, and suddenly the space felt impossibly small. He was tall, over 6 feet, and moved with the shadows behind him of a predator, flanking him at a respectful distance. Derek's debt is now your debt, but I'm not an unreasonable man. He buttoned his suit jacket with precise movements. You'll move into one of my properties tonight. You'll be provided with everything you need. In return, you'll make yourself available when I require your presence. Available? The word tasted like ash. His smile was sharp enough to cut. I'm not talking about sex, Emma, though you are beautiful when you're terrified. He said it clinically, like commenting on the weather. I need someone ordinary. Someone who can move through certain spaces without attracting attention. Someone who has every reason to be grateful for my protection. This isn't protection. This is a cage? He finished for me, tilting his head. Perhaps. But it's a gilded one, and the alternative is watching your life continue its current trajectory until you're found dead in some alley. Or worse. Derek made you a target by association. I'm offering you a way to survive that. He pulled out his phone, one of 3 I could now see clipped to his belt, and typed something quickly. Within seconds, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. My driver is outside. He'll take you to collect your things. You have 30 minutes. He moved toward the door, his guards falling into step like a choreographed dance. At the threshold, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. Oh, and Emma, don't try to run. I have people watching Derek's daughter and her mother. If you disappear, I'll assume you're helping him hide, and then I'll have no choice but to collect his debt in other ways. Do you understand? The threat was crystal clear. That little girl, Derek's daughter, an innocent child, was leverage. Insurance. A chain around my neck more effective than any lock. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I just nodded, a puppet agreeing to her strings. He smiled then, and it was almost gentle, almost kind. It was the most terrifying expression yet. Good girl. I'll see you tomorrow evening. Wear something nicer than... His gaze swept over my stained work clothes. That. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. I sat alone in the empty club, the taste of expensive whiskey still on my tongue, and the weight of impossible choices crushing my chest. Outside, I could hear the purr of a luxury engine, waiting. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Car is waiting. Don't keep him waiting. I looked down at my shaking hands, at the half-empty glass of whiskey, at the silver cigarette case he'd left behind on the table. Deliberately, I realized now, a marker. A claim. I'd come to work tonight thinking this would be just another shift in an endless series of shifts, just another night of surviving. I had no idea I was closing the club for the last time as a free woman. The black SUV idling outside Velvet Noir looked like it cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. Maybe 10. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside, and something about its sleek, armored appearance made it clear this wasn't a vehicle meant to blend in. It was meant to intimidate. The driver stepped out as I approached, and I instinctively took a step back. He was massive, easily 6'5", with the build of someone who'd spent serious time either in a gym or breaking bones, probably both. His suit was impeccable, his expression completely neutral as he opened the rear door for me. "Miss Emma," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone his size. Russian accent, thick and unmistakable. I hesitated at the edge of the curb, my canvas bag clutched to my chest like a shield. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, to disappear into the pre-dawn darkness and never look back. But his words echoed in my mind. I have people watching Derek's daughter. A child I'd never met was now my responsibility, my chain. I climbed into the SUV. The interior smelled like leather and something crisp. Cedar, maybe, and was more luxurious than any space I'd ever occupied. The seats were heated, the climate control already adjusted to a perfect temperature. There was a bottle of water waiting in the cup holder, condensation beating on its surface. The driver closed my door with a gentle click that still sounded final. We drove through the empty streets in silence. I watched the city blur past through the tinted windows, everything familiar suddenly looking alien and distant. My neighborhood appeared after 20 minutes. The rundown building where I'd been living, with its flickering hallway lights and perpetual smell of garbage. 30 minutes, Miss Emma, the driver said as he opened my door. I'll be here. My studio apartment was exactly as I'd left it 12 hours ago. A disaster of unpaid bills, dirty dishes, and laundry I hadn't had time to wash. The eviction notice was still taped to my door, bright orange and impossible to ignore. I tore it down with shaking hands. What was I supposed to pack? What did you bring when a mafia boss decided you belonged to him now? I grabbed my duffel bag and started throwing in clothes, mostly worn jeans and t-shirts, a few pairs of underwear, my toothbrush, the photo of my mother that I'd kept by my bedside since she died 6 years ago. Everything I owned fit into one bag with room to spare. The realization made my throat tight. This was my life. This was all I had to show for 26 years of existence. I was zipping the bag closed when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My window was open. Just a crack. But I always kept it locked. Always. Living in this neighborhood, you learn to be paranoid. Someone had been in my apartment. I spun around, heart hammering, scanning for any sign of disturbance. Nothing looked obviously different, but that almost made it worse. They'd been subtle. Professional. How long had they been watching me? How many times had they been in here while I was working myself to exhaustion? My phone buzzed. Time's up. I grabbed my bag and fled. The property he'd mentioned turned out to be a penthouse in the financial district, the kind of building with a doorman who wore white gloves and a lobby that looked like a 5-star hotel. The driver, who still hadn't told me his name, handed me a key card and escorted me to a private elevator that required both the card and a code to operate. Mr. Alexei will come for you tomorrow at 7 p.m., he said as the elevator doors began to close. Be ready. Mr. Alexei. So now I had a name for the man who'd turned my life upside down in the span of one conversation. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and I nearly dropped my pathetic duffel bag. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city as dawn began to break, painting the skyline in shades of gold and pink. The space was enormous. Open-plan living area with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to use, and hardwood floors so polished I could see my reflection. I wandered through it in a daze, finding 3 bedrooms, each larger than my entire studio had been. The master bedroom had a closet the size of my old apartment, currently empty except for a single garment bag hanging in the center. My hands trembled as I unzipped it. Inside was a dress, black, elegant, with a designer label I recognized from magazines I couldn't afford. My size exactly. Beside it, a shoebox containing heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. He'd known I'd say yes, or maybe he'd known I had no choice. I sank onto the massive bed, my duffel bag looking ridiculous and small against the expensive white linens. The mattress was so soft it felt like floating. And despite everything, the terror, the confusion, the surreal nightmare my life had become, I felt exhaustion crash over me like a wave. I should have been planning my escape. Should have been trying to figure out how to contact the police, how to save that little girl and myself. But what would I tell them? A powerful man had offered me a place to live and asked me to be available. They'd laugh me out of the station if they didn't suspect me of being Derek's accomplice instead. I lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in this city, Derek was hiding, living off stolen money while his daughter grew up without child support, and I paid for his sins. Somewhere, a little girl named, I didn't even know her name, was sleeping, unaware that she'd become a bargaining chip in a game I didn't understand. And somewhere, Alexei was planning whatever came next. I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through the windows and my phone was ringing. Unknown number. My hand shook as I answered. Hello? Good morning, Emma. His voice was even more unsettling in the bright light of day, smooth and controlled. I trust the accommodations are satisfactory. I sat up, disoriented, my body aching from sleeping in my clothes. What do you want from me? Direct? I appreciate that. I could hear the smile in his voice. Today you rest. Explore your new home. Eat something. The kitchen is fully stocked. Tomorrow, your real education begins. Education in what? In surviving the world you've stumbled into. A pause. And when he spoke again, his tone had shifted into something darker. Derek made you a liability, Emma. There are people who will assume you know where he is or what he did with the money. People far less patient than I am. But I don't know anything. I believe you. Others won't. The sound of voices in the background. Then his attention returned fully to me, which is why you'll stay exactly where I put you, and you'll do exactly what I tell you to do, for your protection as much as mine. This isn't protection, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. This is ownership. Silence stretched between us, heavy and dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. Yes, he said simply. It is. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. Another pause. There's a laptop in the study. Use it to look up Derek Castellano's daughter. Her name is Sophie. 4 years old, loves butterflies and strawberry ice cream. Her mother is Maria Castellano. Yes, Derek married her before he met you. Another secret he kept. The revelation hit me like a slap. Derek had been married. I'd been the other woman without even knowing it. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what's at stake. Sophie is innocent. Maria is innocent. You are innocent. But Derek's actions have painted all of you with the same brush, and in my world, that kind of association can be fatal. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the physical distance between us. I'm offering you a way to keep all of you alive. All I ask in return is your loyalty. Loyalty to a criminal. He laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. We're all criminals, Emma. Some of us are just more honest about it. Derek stole from you as surely as he stole from me. The system you trusted to protect you left you drowning in his debts, while he lived comfortably on stolen money. At least I'm offering you a transaction you can understand. Your service for my protection. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that there was a difference between his organized violence and the everyday cruelty of poverty and abandonment. But the words stuck in my throat because part of me, a small, bitter part, understood exactly what he meant. What happens tomorrow? I asked instead. Tomorrow, you meet my world. Wear the dress. Be ready at 7. He was about to hang up when he added, almost as an afterthought, and Emma, don't leave the penthouse. I have security monitoring the building, and they've been instructed to stop you if you try. It would be unpleasant for everyone involved. The line went dead. I sat in the enormous bedroom of my gilded cage, watching the city move below me through windows I couldn't open, and wondered if Derek ever thought about me. If he knew what he'd done. If he cared that he'd sold my freedom to pay for his escape. The laptop was where Alexei said it would be, in a study that looked like it belonged to someone important. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting it to be monitored. It probably was, but I needed to see. I typed in the names he'd given me. Sophie Castellano's photo appeared in a Facebook post from her mother's sparse profile, a beautiful little girl with Derek's eyes and a gap-toothed smile, holding a butterfly net in what looked like a park. The caption read, "My whole world." Maria was pretty, tired-looking, wearing scrubs in her profile picture. A nurse, just like he'd said. Her posts were few and far between, mostly pictures of Sophie, occasionally requests for overtime shifts or selling items to make ends meet. Derek had destroyed her, too. I clicked through the photos, feeling sick. There was one from 3 years ago, Derek, Maria, and baby Sophie, all smiling at the camera. He looked happy. The same smile he'd given me when we'd met, when he'd promised me a future while his wife was at home with their daughter. I slammed the laptop closed and walked to the windows, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city moved like a living thing, people rushing to jobs, to lives, to futures they thought they controlled. I'd been one of them just yesterday. Now I was something else entirely, suspended above it all in a cage that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. The refrigerator was indeed fully stocked. Expensive cheeses, fresh fruit, ingredients I didn't recognize. I made myself eat something, forcing down food that tasted like sawdust because I needed to keep my strength, needed to think clearly. But every thought circled back to the same impossible truth. I was trapped. Trapped by Derek's sins, trapped by Alexei's power, trapped by the invisible chains of a 4-year-old girl who didn't deserve to suffer for her father's crimes. I spent the rest of the day exploring my prison, finding cameras tucked discreetly in corners. Watching, always watching. I found the windows were sealed, the door to the stairs required the same keycard as the elevator, and my phone now had several new numbers programmed in. Driver, security, and simply A. As sunset painted the sky in shades of blood orange, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. My face was pale, my eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. But underneath that, I saw something else beginning to form, something harder, sharper. If I was going to survive this, I needed to stop being the Emma who let life happen to her. I needed to become someone who could navigate this dangerous new world. Tomorrow, Alexei had said, my education would begin. I pulled the black dress from the garment bag and held it against my body, staring at my reflection. The girl looking back at me was a stranger, and maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. The driver arrived at exactly 7 p.m. I'd spent the entire day in a state of anxious preparation, showering 3 times, trying on the dress and taking it off, pacing the penthouse like a caged animal. The dress fit perfectly, of course it did, hugging my curves in ways that made me feel both powerful and exposed. The heels added 3 inches to my height, but made me wobble uncertainly across the polished floors. I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. My dark hair, usually thrown into a messy bun, now fell in soft waves around my shoulders. I'd found makeup in the bathroom, expensive brands, all in shades that complemented my skin tone, and had done my best to look like I belonged in clothes this nice. The elevator chimed, and my heart lurched into my throat. The driver, still nameless, gave me an approving nod as I stepped in. "You look beautiful, Miss Emma. Mr. Alexei will be pleased." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. The SUV was waiting in the private garage, along with 2 other identical vehicles, a convoy. Whatever we were doing tonight required serious security. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled into traffic. "Mr. Alexei is attending a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. You will accompany him." A charity gala, of course. Because crime lords apparently had social calendars that included fundraisers and cultural events. The absurdity would have been funny if I wasn't so terrified. We arrived at a side entrance where a handful of other luxury vehicles were discharging their passengers. The driver came around to open my door, and suddenly I was stepping out onto a red carpet, flashbulbs popping from somewhere I couldn't quite see. And there he was. Alexei stood at the base of the museum steps, looking like he'd been carved from marble and poured into a tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw freshly shaved, and those dangerous eyes found me immediately. 2 men flanked him, not the same ones from the club, but cut from the same cloth, alert, armed, watching everything. He moved toward me with that liquid grace, and I fought the urge to step back. "Emma." My name on his lips still sent shivers down my spine. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His fingers were warm, calloused, and closed around mine with gentle possession. "You're stunning." "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely steady. He tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow, and suddenly we were moving up the steps together, his security detail falling into formation around us. People nodded to him as we passed. Deferential, slightly nervous nods that spoke volumes about who he was in this world. "Smile," he murmured near my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "You're supposed to be enjoying yourself." I forced my lips into something approximating a smile, acutely aware of his hand covering mine on his arm, anchoring me to his side. The museum's great hall had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, women in gowns that cost more than cars, and men in tuxedos discussing business deals worth millions. Champagne flowed freely, and a string quartet played somewhere in the background. I'd never felt more out of place in my life. "Relax," Alexei said softly, guiding me through the crowd with practiced ease. "You look like you're walking to your execution." "Isn't that exactly what this is?" I whispered back. His laugh was low and genuine. "If I wanted you dead, Emma, you wouldn't be here in a designer dress drinking champagne. You'd be at the bottom of the East River." He said it casually, like commenting on the weather, and somehow that made it more terrifying. Tonight is about showing you what protection looks like, who my allies are, who my enemies are, how to move in this world. A waiter appeared with champagne flutes. Alexei took two, pressing one into my hand. Don't drink too much, he advised. You need to stay sharp. Watch people's reactions when they see you with me. Listen to what they say, and more importantly, what they don't say. Before I could respond, a silver-haired man in an expensive tuxedo approached, his smile wide but not reaching his eyes. Alexei, good to see you, my friend. They shook hands with the kind of grip that looked friendly, but was clearly a test of dominance. The man's gaze slid to me, assessing. And who is this lovely creature? Emma, Alexei said, his hand moving to the small of my back in a gesture that was both protective and proprietary. Emma, this is Thomas Marconi. He owns half the construction companies in New York. Ah, you flatter me. Marconi's smile was practiced, politician smooth. Only a third, I assure you. He took my hand and kissed it, lingering just a fraction too long. Enchanted, my dear. I don't believe I've seen you at one of these events before. First time, I said, trying to channel the confidence of someone who belonged here. How fortunate for all of us. His eyes moved between Alexei and me, calculating. I didn't know you were seeing anyone, Alexei. You're usually so private about such matters. Emma is special, Alexei said, and there was a warning edge in his tone that made Marconi's smile falter slightly. I trust you'll extend her the same courtesy you'd extend me. Of course. Of course. Marconi backed away smoothly, already scanning the crowd for safer conversations. Wonderful to meet you, Emma, Alexei. As he disappeared into the crowd, Alexei leaned close to my ear. See how quickly he retreated? That's because he owes me money and knows better than to test my patience. But notice he was gathering information, trying to understand what you are to me, what leverage you might represent, and what am I to you? The question escaped before I could stop it. His dark eyes held mine, unreadable. That's what everyone here is trying to figure out. He took a sip of his champagne, let them wonder. The evening continued in a blur of introductions and subtle power plays. I met judges and politicians, business owners and socialites, all of whom treated Alexei with a mixture of respect and barely concealed fear. Some were warmer toward me than others, but they all studied me with the same calculating gaze, trying to determine my value, my purpose, my weakness. Alexei never left my side. His hand was always somewhere on me, my back, my elbow, occasionally my waist, guiding me through conversations and away from questions I didn't know how to answer. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple, intimate and comfortable. But I felt the tension in his body when certain people approached, saw how his security detail shifted positions in response to specific individuals. This wasn't just a social event. It was a chess game played with champagne and smiles instead of guns and threats. There's someone I want you to meet, Alexei said, steering me toward a woman standing alone near one of the ice sculptures. She was beautiful in a cold, sharp way. Platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than a car, and diamonds that caught the light with every movement. But it was her eyes that struck me, pale blue and utterly frigid as they landed on me. Victoria, Alexei said, his tone carefully neutral. You look well. Alexei? Her accent was thick, Russian, and dripping with disdain. Her gaze raked over me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. So the rumors are true. You've replaced me with this. The venom in her voice made me flinch. But Alexei's hand tightened on my waist, steady, grounding. I didn't replace you, Victoria. We ended months ago, and it was mutual. Mutual, she repeated, her laugh bitter and sharp. Is that what you tell yourself? She took a step closer, and I caught the scent of her perfume. Expensive and overwhelming, like roses drowning in alcohol. Does she know what you are, Alexei? What you do? Or is she just another naive little plaything you'll discard when you're bored? Careful, Alexei said, and his voice dropped into something lethal. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Victoria's voice rose, and several heads turned in our direction. "You parade your new whore in front of everyone and I'm making a scene?" The word hit me like a physical blow. Heat flooded my face, shame and anger warring for dominance. "That's enough." Alexei's tone could have frozen fire. Two of his security detail materialized from the crowd, silent and imposing. "Escort Ms. Petrova to her car. She's leaving." "Don't you dare!" Victoria started, but the security moved in, and she was smart enough to recognize she'd lost. She shot me one last look of pure hatred before allowing herself to be guided away, her exit far less graceful than her presence had been. The crowd pretended not to have noticed, conversations resuming with forced casualness. I was shaking, barely holding myself together. Alexei's hand moved to my face, turning me to look at him. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "Breathe," he commanded softly. "Don't let her see she got to you. She called me a—" "I know what she called you. She's wrong." His thumb brushed my cheek, the gesture oddly tender. "Victoria is bitter because I chose to end things, and she's been looking for a way to hurt me ever since. You're not what she said. You're—" "What?" I challenged, finding my voice through the humiliation. "What am I, Alexei? Because I don't even know anymore. Am I your employee? Your prisoner? You're mine." The word was absolute, final. "You're mine, Emma. And in this world, that's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that keeps you safe." The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified me, should have made me want to run screaming. But instead, standing there in a room full of dangerous people who now saw me as an extension of him, I felt something shift inside me. He was right. Whether I liked it or not, his claim on me was the only thing standing between me and the kind of people who'd use me to get to him. Or worse. "Come," he said, offering his arm again. "We're leaving." The ride back to the penthouse was silent. Alexei sat across from me in the SUV, his expression distant, his mind clearly working through something. His phone buzzed constantly, different devices for different purposes, I was beginning to understand, and he answered some calls in rapid Russian, his tone clipped and authoritative. I stared out the window, replaying the evening, the careful choreography of power, the way people reacted to Alexei's presence. Victoria's hatred and the security detail's instant response to a perceived threat. This was his world, and I was expected to learn how to survive in it. When we arrived at the building, Alexei followed me into the elevator. I hadn't expected that, and my pulse quickened as the doors closed, sealing us in the small space together. "You did well tonight," he said, his gaze intense in the confined space. "Better than I expected." I barely said anything. "Exactly. You watched. You listened. You didn't panic when Victoria attacked you." He stepped closer, and suddenly the elevator felt impossibly small. "But you need to understand something, Emma. What happened tonight will happen again. People will test you, try to use you, attempt to find your weaknesses. You need to be stronger. I don't know how to be what you need me to be," I admitted, hating how vulnerable I sounded. The elevator reached the penthouse, but Alexei didn't move. He placed one hand on the door to keep it from closing, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Then I'll teach you," he said softly. "Starting tomorrow, you'll have lessons. Self-defense, etiquette, languages. You'll learn how to move in my world without making yourself a target, and if I refuse." His smile was sad, almost regretful. "We both know you won't. Not while Sophie and Maria are vulnerable. Not while Derek's debt hangs over your head." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture that felt far too intimate. "You're smart, Emma. Smarter than you give yourself credit for. You'll learn quickly." He stepped out of the elevator, and I followed on unsteady legs. At the door to the penthouse, he paused. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be demanding." He started to leave, then turned back. "And Emma? What Victoria said, forget it. You're worth 10 of her." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my gilded cage with the taste of champagne on my tongue and the ghost of his touch still burning on my skin. I changed out of the dress carefully, hanging it back in the closet like something sacred and terrifying. In the mirror, I could still see the woman from tonight, poised, beautiful, dangerous by association. That woman scared me more than anything else. Because part of me had liked it, liked the power of being on Alexei's arm, liked the way people treated me with respect, tinged with fear, liked feeling protected for the first time in years, even if that protection came with chains. I climbed into the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Somewhere in this city, Derek was hiding, living his life without a single thought for the destruction he'd left behind. And somewhere in this building, Alexei was planning my next lesson in survival. I touched my cheek where his thumb had brushed away my shame, and hated myself for the warmth that small gesture had created. This was supposed to be a prison, so why was I starting to feel like I belonged here? The next 3 weeks blurred together in a relentless schedule that left me exhausted and transformed. Every morning at 6 a.m., a woman named Irina arrived, stern, Russian, and utterly unimpressed by my lack of coordination. She taught me Krav Maga, the Israeli self-defense system that Alexei's security team used. By the end of the first week, my body was covered in bruises, but I could throw a punch that actually connected. By the end of the second, I'd learned how to break someone's grip and where to strike to incapacitate an attacker. "You're small," Irina said in her thick accent, circling me like a predator, "so you use their size against them. Speed, precision, ruthlessness, no hesitation." After combat training came language lessons. A patient older man named Victor taught me conversational Russian, the language Alexei and his inner circle used when they didn't want others to understand. I was far from fluent, but I could recognize when they were discussing business, threats, or me. Afternoons were devoted to etiquette with a woman named Claire, who'd worked with diplomats and politicians. She taught me which fork to use, how to read a room, how to deflect uncomfortable questions with grace, and, most importantly, how to appear confident even when terrified. "Posture, Emma," she'd remind me constantly. "You represent him now, shoulders back, chin up. You're not a victim anymore." But it was the evenings that truly changed me. Alexei came to the penthouse every night around 8, sometimes staying for an hour, sometimes until well past midnight. We never touched beyond the occasional brush of hands or his palm at the small of my back when we practiced walking together. But those hours felt more intimate than any physical contact could have been. He told me about his world, not everything, never everything, but enough. The families he worked with and against. The businesses that were fronts and the ones that were legitimate. The code he lived by, which was brutal but consistent, loyalty above all, betrayal punished without mercy. Family protected at any cost. Family seemed to be the key to understanding him. He'd grown up in Moscow, the youngest of 4 brothers. 2 were dead now. One from a rival's bullet, one from his own hand after betraying their father. His surviving brother ran operations in Europe. His father had died 5 years ago, leaving Alexei to take control of the New York territory. "He was hard," Alexei said one night, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass as we sat in the penthouse living room. "My father. He believed emotions were weakness. That fear was the only reliable motivator. He taught us to survive, but not to live." "Do you agree with him?" I asked, emboldened by 3 weeks of daily conversations. His dark eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. "I used to. Now, I'm not so sure." He set the glass down carefully. "You're changing my perspective on some things, Emma." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the glittering city. "Derek contacted Maria yesterday." My heart stopped. "What?" He called her, asked about Sophie, told Maria he'd send money soon. Alexei's voice was flat, emotionless. She recorded the call and brought it to me. "Why would she—" I started, then understood. "You've been protecting them, Maria and Sophie. Of course." He turned to face me, silhouetted against the city lights. "I told you. Family is protected. Derek's daughter is innocent. His wife is innocent. They don't deserve to suffer for his stupidity. But you're using them to control me." "Yes." He didn't deny it, didn't soften it. "I'm using them to ensure your cooperation. But I'm also genuinely protecting them, which is more than Derek ever did." He crossed back to where I sat, looming over me. Would you like to meet them? The question caught me completely off guard. What? Maria and Sophie. Would you like to meet them? He pulled out his phone. The middle one, I'd learned, was for personal matters, and showed me a photo. The same little girl from Facebook, but recent, playing in a park. Maria knows about you. She knows Derek lied to both of you. She asked if she could meet the woman her husband destroyed. Tears stung my eyes unexpectedly. She doesn't hate me. She hates Derek. You're just another victim of his lies. Alexei's expression softened slightly. I've arranged for them to come to tea tomorrow afternoon, if you want. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His hand touched my shoulder briefly. There and gone. But the warmth lingered. Good. It's time you understood the full scope of what you're protecting. Maria Castellano was nothing like I'd imagined. She arrived the next afternoon with Sophie, who immediately gravitated toward the penthouse windows, pressing her small hands against the glass and squealing with delight at the view. Maria watched her daughter with obvious adoration, then turned to me with tired but kind eyes. Emma, she said, and there was no hatred in her voice, only exhausted solidarity. Thank you for agreeing to meet us. We sat in the living room while Sophie explored under the watchful eye of one of Alexei's security team, a surprisingly gentle giant who knelt down to answer her endless questions about the castle in the sky. I'm sorry, I blurted out, unable to hold it back. I had no idea about you, about Sophie. If I'd known Derek was married, he was good at hiding things, Maria interrupted gently, from both of us. I thought he was working late. I thought the money problems were temporary. Her voice cracked. I thought a lot of things that turned out to be lies. How long have you known? About Alexei, I mean, about what Derek did. 2 months. She glanced toward where Sophie was making the security guard hold an imaginary tea party. Men came to my apartment, polite, but terrifying. They asked about Derek, about money, about where he might have gone. I told them I didn't know, which was true. Derek disappeared without a word. She met my eyes. Then Mr. Volkov showed up personally. What did he say? That Derek had stolen from him, that Sophie and I were in danger from people who'd assume we knew where Derek was hiding, that he could protect us if I cooperated. She smiled bitterly. What choice did I have? I'm a single mother with a 4-year-old. I work doubles to keep us fed. When a man like Alexei Volkov offers protection, you take it. He's using us, I said softly. Both of us. Using Sophie to keep us in line, I know. Maria's voice was equally quiet. But he's also genuinely protecting us. New locks on my apartment, security cameras. His men follow us to make sure we're safe. He even set up a trust fund for Sophie's education. She shook her head in wonder. A criminal is taking better care of my daughter than her own father ever did. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women bound together by the same man's betrayal and the same man's control. Do you hate me? I finally asked. For being with Derek while you were— No, Maria said firmly. I hate Derek. You were lied to just like me. We're both victims of the same selfish, cowardly man. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Alexei told me he's keeping you here, that you're working off Derek's debt, something like that. Is he— She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Is he treating you well? The question surprised me. I thought about the training, the lessons, the evenings spent talking, the way Alexei's hand would rest on my back when we walked together. The intensity in his eyes when he looked at me. The strange sense of safety I felt in his presence, despite everything. Yes, I admitted. Better than I expected. Better than I probably deserve given what Derek did to him. Maria's expression turned knowing. Be careful, Emma. Men like Alexei Volkov don't do anything without a reason. If he's treating you well, it's because you're valuable to him somehow. Don't forget that. Before I could respond, Sophie came running over, her small hands full of sketches she'd made. Mommy, look! I drew the princess and the castle. The drawing showed stick figures. One tall with dark hair labeled Prince, one smaller labeled Princess, and a tiny one labeled me with butterfly wings. Maria and I exchanged glances over Sophie's head, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel quite so alone. That evening, Alexei arrived earlier than usual, his expression darker than I'd seen in weeks. "We have a problem," he said without preamble, pouring himself 3 fingers of vodka and downing it in one smooth motion. Derek surfaced. He tried to access one of his old accounts, and we traced the IP address to a hotel in Atlantic City. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You found him?" "We found where he was. He's gone now. He's not stupid enough to stay in one place." Alexei poured another drink, this time offering one to me. I took it. "But it confirms he's still in the area, which means he's either incredibly arrogant or incredibly desperate." "What does this mean for Maria and Sophie?" "For me, it means we need to draw him out." Alexei's gaze locked onto mine, intense and calculating. "And you're going to help me do it." Cold fear washed over me. "How?" "We let it leak that you're with me, that you're under my protection." Derek still has contacts, people who owe him favors or feed him information. When he hears that his ex-girlfriend is living in luxury as my companion, his ego won't be able to handle it. "You want to use me as bait. I want to use you as motivation." He set his glass down and crossed to where I stood, backing me against the windows. His hands came to rest on either side of my head, caging me in without touching me. Derek is a coward, but he's also possessive. The idea of you being mine will eat at him. He'll make a mistake, try to contact you, and when he does, we'll have him. And then what? My voice came out barely above a whisper. "You kill him?" "That depends on whether he returns my money," and grovels convincingly. His face was inches from mine, his breath warm against my skin. "Does that bother you? The thought of Derek dying for what he did?" I searched my feelings and found the answer surprising. No, not as much as it should. Something flickered in Alexei's eyes, approval, or maybe hunger. "You're learning, Emma. Learning that survival sometimes requires ruthlessness." "Is that what you're teaching me? To be ruthless?" "I'm teaching you to be strong. There's a difference." His hand came up, fingers tracing the line of my jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. "When I first saw you at that club, scrubbing floors at 3 a.m, you looked like a ghost. Like you'd given up on everything except the next breath, the next shift, the next bill." "I had given up," I admitted. "Derek took everything from me, and I didn't know how to fight back, and now I'm learning." I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away despite the intensity burning in those dark eyes. "But I'm still not sure if I'm learning to survive, or just trading one prison for another." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and electricity shot through me. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe all of life is just choosing which cage you can tolerate. He leaned closer, his lips almost touching mine. "But at least this cage has better amenities." My breath caught. For 3 weeks, he'd been careful, professional, maintaining distance even in our most intimate conversations. But now, trapped between his body and the window with the city lights glittering below us, that distance evaporated like morning fog. "Alexei," I started, not sure if I was protesting or pleading. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against my ear, his voice rough with something dangerous. "Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll go back to being your captor, and you'll go back to being my obligation." But I couldn't say it, because despite everything, the fear, the coercion, the impossible situation, I did feel it. That pull between us had been building for weeks, disguised as lessons and conversations and casual touches that felt anything but casual. "I hate you," I whispered. But even I could hear the lie in it. "No, you don't." His lips brushed my neck, sending shivers down my spine. "You hate that you don't hate me. You hate that I make you feel safe when you should feel terrified. You hate that part of you wants this just as much as I do. This is wrong." "Probably." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his expression raw and honest in a way I'd never seen. "But I stopped caring about right and wrong a long time ago. I care about what I want, and I want you, Emma. Not because of Derek, not because of some debt. I want you because you're fire wrapped in ice, because you're strong even when you think you're weak, because you look at me like I'm a monster and a man at the same time." His confession hung in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. If I do this, I said carefully, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. If I stop fighting this, you can't use it against me. You can't use it as another chain. I won't, he promised. And I believed him. Maybe I was a fool, but I believed him. What happens between us is separate from everything else. Separate from Derek, from the debt, from the business. How do I know you mean that? You don't. His honesty was brutal, but I've never lied to you, Emma. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. I'm offering you the only thing I can, the truth of what I am and what I want. I should have pushed him away, should have remembered that he was a criminal, that he'd coerced me into this life, that he was dangerous in ways I couldn't fully comprehend, but instead, I reached up and pulled him down to me, closing the last inches between us. His kiss was nothing like I expected. It wasn't rough or demanding. It was almost reverent, like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me flush against him, and I melted into the warmth of his body. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This complicates things, I whispered. Everything about you complicates things. But he was smiling, genuinely smiling, and it transformed his entire face into something almost boyish. I should go, before I complicate them further. Probably a good idea, but neither of us moved. We stood there in the dim light of the penthouse, wrapped around each other like we could somehow protect each other from the dangers we both knew were coming. Finally, reluctantly, he stepped back. Tomorrow night, we're going to dinner. Public, visible. We'll make sure word gets back to Derek. His expression hardened back into the mask of the crime boss. Be ready at 7. And Emma? Yes? Wear red. I want him to see exactly what he lost. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the taste of him on my lips, and the terrifying realization that somewhere along the way I'd stopped being his captive and started being something far more dangerous. I'd started being his. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't advertise. If you needed to know where it was, you weren't important enough to be there. Perched on the top floor of a building in Tribeca, it offered panoramic views of the city and prices that made my eyes water when I glimpsed the menu. I wore red, as instructed, a dress that hugged every curve, with a neckline that suggested more than it showed. My hair was swept up, exposing my neck and the diamond earrings Alexei had sent over that afternoon with a simple note. Wear these. They were probably worth more than my entire previous life. Alexei's hand never left the small of my back as we moved through the restaurant. Every head turned, some in admiration, some in barely concealed fear. This wasn't just dinner. It was a statement, a declaration of ownership that echoed through every whisper and sidelong glance. We were seated at a private table near the windows, his security detail positioned strategically throughout the restaurant. One of them I recognized now, Dmitri, who'd been teaching me advanced defensive tactics. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod as we passed. You're making quite an impression, Alexei murmured as he held my chair. His fingers brushed my bare shoulder, and I felt that touch all the way down to my toes. That's the point, isn't it? I met his gaze steadily. You want Derek to hear about this. You want him to know. I want everyone to know. He took his seat across from me, his expression possessive and proud in equal measure. That you're mine. That anyone who touches you answers to me. The waiter appeared with champagne, the expensive kind that tasted like clouds and starlight. We ordered, though I barely registered what I asked for. My entire focus was on Alexei, on the dangerous game we were playing, on the way his eyes tracked every movement I made like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. Tell me something, I said once we were alone again. When this started, when you first came to the club, was this always the plan? To make me yours? He considered the question, swirling his champagne thoughtfully. Honestly? No. The plan was to use you to find Derek, then release you once the debt was settled. But plans change. What changed? You did. His gaze was intense, unwavering. You were supposed to be terrified, compliant, broken. Instead, you learned to fight. You asked questions. You challenged me. A slight smile played at his lips. You made yourself impossible to let go. So now what? I'm your kept woman? Your trophy? You're whatever you choose to be, Emma. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. I won't lie. I want you in my bed, in my life, by my side. But I won't force that. The cage stays, because it's the only way I can keep you safe. But what happens inside that cage? That's your choice. Before I could respond, Dmitri appeared at Alexei's shoulder, leaning down to whisper something in Russian. I caught enough to understand. He's here. Alexei's entire demeanor shifted, from lover to predator in the space of a heartbeat. Where? Outside, watching through the windows with binoculars from the building across the street. Dmitri's expression was granite. Do you want us to move? No. Alexei's hand found mine across the table, gripping it with barely contained intensity. Let him watch. Let him see exactly what he's lost. My heart hammered against my ribs. Derek was out there watching us, watching me with another man, in clothes he could never have afforded, living a life he'd destroyed and handed to someone else. Emma. Alexei's voice pulled me back. Look at me. Not out there. At me. I obeyed, meeting those dark eyes that had become so familiar over the past month. He's going to make a move tonight, Alexei said calmly, like we were discussing the weather. His ego won't let him just watch. He'll try to contact you, confront you, something. And when he does, my men will be ready. What if he runs? He won't get far. The certainty in his tone was absolute. I have this entire block locked down. The building he's in, the streets, the exits. The moment he tries to leave, we'll have him. Our food arrived, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was twisted in knots, adrenaline singing through my veins. Across from me, Alexei ate calmly, occasionally glancing at his phone as updates came in from his team. He's moving, Dmitri murmured 20 minutes later, heading down, probably going to try the service entrance. Alexei stood smoothly, offering me his hand. Come. We're leaving through the front. I want him to see us together one more time before this ends. The elevator ride down was silent except for the soft ding of passing floors. Alexei's hand held mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Soothing, or claiming, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The lobby was eerily quiet. Alexei's men had clearly evacuated it, positioning themselves strategically. Through the glass doors, I could see our SUV waiting, engine running. Stay close to me, Alexei instructed as we moved toward the exit. Don't let go of my hand. We stepped out into the cool night air, and that's when I heard it. Emma! Derek's voice, raw with fury and desperation, cut through the night. He burst from the alley beside the building, and my breath caught in my throat. He looked terrible. Gaunt, unshaven, his clothes rumpled and stained. Nothing like the charming man who'd swept me off my feet 2 years ago. This was Derek stripped down to his core, a coward and a thief running out of places to hide. Alexei's security moved instantly, surrounding us, but Alexei held up a hand. Let him speak. I want to hear what he has to say. Derek stumbled toward us, and I saw tears streaming down his face. Emma, please. You have to help me. This psychopath is going to kill me. You stole $300,000 from me, Alexei interrupted, his voice conversational. You abandoned your wife and daughter. You left Emma to drown in your debts. Tell me, Derek, why exactly should she help you? Because she loves me. Derek's eyes found mine, desperate and pleading. Emma, we had something. We can have it again. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. You had a wife, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. You had a daughter. You had me. And you threw all of it away for money you didn't even get to enjoy. I did it for us. For our future. Don't. The word came out sharp as a blade. Don't you dare try to make this about me. You did it for yourself. You've always only thought about yourself. Derek's face crumpled. Emma, please. I'm begging you. Tell him to let me go. We can disappear together. Start over. She's not going anywhere with you, Alexei said, and his tone held finality. She's mine now. Has been for a month. And unlike you, I don't abandon what's mine. The words should have made me angry. That possessive claim, that public declaration. But instead, I felt something else. something that felt dangerously like pride. Derek's expression twisted into something ugly. You think you're better than me? He spat at Alexei. You're a criminal. A murderer. She's with you because you forced her, not because she wants to be. Is that true, Emma? Alexei asked quietly, his eyes never leaving Derek. Did I force you? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. This was my chance. I could say yes, could try to use this confrontation to escape, to break free of Alexei's control. But as I looked at Derek, pathetic, desperate, still lying even now, and then at Alexei, dangerous, yes, but honest, protective, mine, I knew what the truth was. No, I said clearly. You didn't force me. Derek's face went white. You're sleeping with him. You're actually... Oh God, Emma, how could you? How could I? The laugh that escaped me was bitter. You left me with nothing, Derek. You destroyed my life. And when I had nowhere else to turn, he gave me shelter. He protected your daughter when you never paid a dime of child support. He's been more of a man in 1 month than you were in 2 years. I'm calling the police. Derek started backing away, pulling out his phone. And tell them what? Alexei's smile was razor sharp. That you stole money from organized crime? That you want to confess to fraud, embezzlement, and abandonment? By all means, make the call. Derek's hand shook so badly he dropped the phone. The money's gone. I spent it. I can't pay you back. I know. Alexei's tone was almost gentle. Which is why you're going to work off the debt instead. Derek's eyes widened with hope. I'll do anything. You're going to turn yourself in to the FBI. Alexei gestured, and Dmitri stepped forward with a folder. These are detailed records of every transaction you made, every person you screwed over, every law you broke. You're going to cooperate fully with their investigation into financial crimes in the city. That's a death sentence. If I rat out those people, they'll kill me in prison. Perhaps. Alexei shrugged. But you'll be alive long enough to see your daughter grow up from behind bars. You'll have the chance to apologize to Maria for abandoning her. You'll have the opportunity to reflect on your choices. He paused. Or I can kill you right now and save everyone the trouble. Your choice. The silence stretched thin and brittle. Derek looked between Alexei and me, searching for any sign of mercy, any crack in our united front. He found none. I'll do it. He whispered finally, broken. I'll cooperate. Smart man. Alexei nodded to his men. Take him to the federal building. I've already arranged for his voluntary surrender. As Derek was led away, crying now, begging for forgiveness that would never come, Alexei turned to me. His hand cupped my face gently, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Are you all right? He asked softly. I don't know. I leaned into his touch, suddenly exhausted. I thought seeing him again would make me feel something. Anger, or sadness, or something, but I just feel empty. That's grief, Alexei said. Grief for who you thought he was, for the future you thought you'd have. It's normal. You sound like you know from experience. I've grieved many things in my life. His expression turned distant. People I trusted who betrayed me. Dreams that died with my brothers. The man I thought I could be before this life claimed me. He refocused on me, and the intensity in his gaze stole my breath. But I'm not grieving you, Emma. I'm keeping you. Even though Derek's going to prison, even though the debt is essentially settled, the debt was never why I kept you. He pulled me closer, and I went willingly. I kept you because from the moment you looked at me with those defiant eyes in that empty club, I knew you were different, special, mine. I'm not a possession. No, he agreed. You're not. You're a choice. Every day you choose to stay. You choose to let me protect you. You choose this. He gestured between us. Whatever this is. And what is this, Alexei? I needed to hear him say it. What are we? He kissed me then, deep and possessive and tender all at once, right there on the street with his security team pretending not to watch, and the city moving around us like we were the only still point in a spinning world. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. We're two broken people who found something whole in each other. We're the beginning of something that terrifies me because I've never wanted anything as much as I want you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We're whatever you'll let us be. I want to meet your brother," I said suddenly. "I want to know your world, all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that looked like respect. "That's dangerous, Emma. Once you're fully in this world, there's no going back. You'll know things that make you a target. You'll be tied to me in ways that can't be undone." "I know." I met his gaze steadily. "But I'm already tied to you, already a target. I might as well understand what I'm fighting for." "And what are you fighting for?" "This." I kissed him again, softer this time. "Us," whatever that means. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for maybe the first time since I'd met him. "Then we'll figure it out together." 6 months later, the brownstone in Brooklyn was everything I'd never known I wanted. 3 stories of history and charm, with a garden out back where Sophie could play when Maria brought her to visit, which was often. Maria had become the sister I'd never had, bonded by shared trauma and unexpected redemption. Alexei had bought the building outright, renovated it completely, and handed me the deed. "You're home," he'd said simply. "Not a cage, not a prison, just home." I still couldn't quite believe it was mine. The kitchen smelled like the borscht Alexei's brother Victor had taught me to make during his visit from Moscow. Irina was coming for dinner, along with Dmitri and Claire. My new family, chosen, strange, and utterly unexpected. Alexei found me in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around me from behind and pressing a kiss to my neck. "It smells amazing. Victor would say it needs more dill." "Victor says everything needs more dill." He turned me in his arms, and I saw the contentment in his expression. He looked younger when he was happy, the hard edges of his face softening into something approaching peace. "I heard from the FBI today," I said. "Derek's testimony is helping them build a case against the fraud ring. He might get a reduced sentence." "How do you feel about that?" I considered the question honestly. "I hope he uses the time to become better, for Sophie's sake if nothing else. She deserves a father who actually shows up." "She has us," Alexei said. "Not the same, but we'll make sure she's protected, educated, loved. You're surprisingly good with her, you know. She adores you." "She's easy to adore. She doesn't judge me for what I am." His hand moved to rest over my stomach, where our own secret was just beginning to grow. "Do you think ours will be the same?" I'd told him 2 days ago. He'd gone completely still, processing the information, then kissed me so hard we'd both forgotten how to breathe. "I think ours will be loved," I said. "Protected. Raised by 2 people who understand what it means to survive. And fight. And fight," I agreed, "but also what it means to choose love over fear." He kissed me slowly, reverently, like he still couldn't quite believe I was real. "I never thought I'd have this, a home, a family. Someone who knows exactly what I am and chooses me anyway." I could say the same thing. I touched his face, tracing the scar along his jaw that he'd finally told me the story behind. "You terrify me sometimes, you know. The things you're capable of. I know. But you also make me feel safer than I've ever felt. Stronger. Like I can handle whatever comes. You can." His voice was certain. "You're the strongest person I know, Emma. You survived Derek, survived me, survived being thrown into a world that chews up and spits out people far more prepared than you were. And you didn't just survive, you thrived." The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of our guests. But before we went to answer it, Alexei held me close one more time. "Thank you," he whispered against my hair. "For what?" "For saying yes to that last drink. For giving me a chance when you had every reason to run. For choosing this life with me." I thought back to that night in the empty club, when a dangerous stranger had sat down and asked for one last drink, when my entire world had shattered and reformed into something I never could have imagined. "I love you," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. His eyes went wide. I'd never said it before, too afraid of what it meant, too uncertain if it was real or just Stockholm Syndrome dressed up as devotion. But it was real. As real as the child growing inside me. As real as the home we'd built together. as real as the life we'd carved out of violence and trauma and unexpected grace. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. And as we opened the door to welcome our strange, beautiful, dangerous family inside, I realized something profound. I'd spent my whole life waiting to be saved, but in the end, I'd saved myself. By choosing to stop being a victim and start being a survivor, by choosing to see past the monster to the man underneath, by choosing to build something new from the ashes of everything Derek had destroyed. The cage had become a home, the captor had become my partner. And the terrified girl scrubbing floors at 3 a.m. had become a woman who knew her own strength. Outside, the city hummed with its endless rhythm. Somewhere, Derek sat in a cell, paying for his crimes. Somewhere, other women were struggling, surviving, fighting their own battles. But here, in this brownstone in Brooklyn, surrounded by people who'd become family in the strangest of ways, I'd found something I'd never expected to find. I'd found peace, and love, and a future worth fighting for. Alexi's hand found mine as we greeted our guests, and I squeezed it gently, a promise, a claim, a choice made freely every single day. This was my life now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.